all, and thanks for joining our webinar series on CTC Tools. Today, we will be looking at pipe networks. Joining me once again is my colleague, Colin Gade, and I'm Ramil Laksamana, one of the account managers for the infrastructure GIS team at SolidCAD. Here's our agenda for today. We will discover today industry's best practices for creating and editing civil 3D pipe networks. Colin will illustrate the CTC pipe designer, parts tagger, and parts swapper, and how these tools will make editing to your pipe network much easier, streamlining your workflow. We'll conclude the hour with a Q&A session, so please type in your questions in the chat icon below, and we'll address them at the end. But before we get started, just an announcement of our ongoing training courses. Civil 3D Fundamentals for February 16th and 19th, and another on March 2nd to the 5th. These are 4-day sessions. Please note that the start times on these, they are conducted in different time zones to help clients out located nationwide. We are also having a Civil 3D for Transportation Design Professionals. This is ideal for those involved in road and highway design. And this is aimed to show you how to match pre-existing driveways, sidewalk, and property lines within reconstruction projects and local road design. Now, upon completion of that course, a complimentary copy of the Ontario Sub-Assemblies and Custom Styles template will be provided. So please reach out to your sales rep for details and to reserve your spot, or visit our solidcad.ca for more courses, events, and general info. Now, SolidCAD has incorporated CTC Tools as part of their product line only because we wanted to be partnering with the industry leaders in productivity tools. CTC has developed rich add-ins for Civil 3D and Revit, establishing membership with Autodesk as part of their developer network. They've set the pace in developing SIM, BIM technologies, and software services. Now, we've listened to our clients, and with high demand and anticipation, put forth development of a tool that recently just came out. Earthwork Processor. This tool will allow you to generate variable depth subgrade services, resulting in cut and fills in just few inputs. You can then label, hatch, or export your results with just a few clicks. This is something that's not done in Civil 3D and where it falls short out of the box. Earthwork Processor, again, is new and is part of the same suite as the piping tools, which we're about to show you today, and accessible at no additional cost. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to my colleague, Colin, for our demo on CTC Tools, pipe network, and best practices.
Great, thanks a lot, Ramil. Can you just give me a thumbs up? You can see my screen there?
All good.
Right on. Well, like Ramil was saying, we're going to start talking about gravity pipe networks and the best practices. We're going to start talking about, I say best practices, it's a lot more of kind of a couple use case scenarios, but more popular practices. If you've got stuff that you're doing right now and you're getting the job done and you're getting it done efficiently, that's awesome. We don't need to change your workflows. But what I hope these presentations do, as we've done a series of these webinars offering up best practices and CTC tools, hopefully it challenges your workflows a little bit. It shows you new ways to manipulate the tools and manipulate the objects in Civil 3D, and hopefully pull a little bit more efficiency out of the software so we can get our jobs done faster and at the end of the day, I guess, make more money. So we're going to talk about a number of topics today. Let's start off with parts lists though. We're going to start talking about parts lists, and when we're talking about them and with regards to creating all of our pipe networks, everything starts with a parts list. There's a lot of different aspects to it with regards to pay items and rules and styles. We're going to start with the one that I see people use the least, which is pay items. And we can assign pay items from a CSV file or a TXT file and have that represent and tag that 100 mil PVC pipe, for example, with that pay item. Then with a couple simple clicks, you can use the native QTO and takeoffs to gather total quantities across your whole project. It's really easy to do this kind of stuff. I find not many people do it. And all you really need for it is a little CSV that looks something like this. So we've got a pay item name, we've got the descriptions, and we've got how each unit is paid. Is it each? Is it meters? Is it square meters kind of thing? It all depends on the type of thing you're trying to attach to that, or attach that pay item to. Now, that being said, a couple things to remember: 100 mil PVC pipe. There will definitely be multiple pay items for this. When we're talking about storm versus sanitary versus storm laterals, all of those are paid at different pay scales because there's a lot of different stuff that goes into those, whether it's mainline pipe and trenching depths and things like that. A lot of the times, all that stuff is lumped into one linear meter pay item. So you do have to create multiple pay items, but once you do that and load it into Civil 3D, it's all about the setup. It's getting it all set up ahead of time, and you can have these quantities a lot faster than doing it on a PDF or afterwards looking up quantities and distances just in your design. The next thing that I want to talk about here is rule sets. Now, rule sets, there's rule sets for pipes. There's different rule sets for structures. And each rule set, what it's going to do is when you're picking and clicking in plan view to try and produce a pipe network, these rule sets are going to help you with cover and slope, with length checks and things like that. Sump depths when you're talking about structures. And it's going to help you deal with some of that three-dimensional data a little bit better. It's going to help you offer a max and minimum criteria for each of those, and then flag those things as you're editing those pipes and say, hey, it's actually not following the rules that you've set out for the area that you're designing in. Civil 3D comes with one standard rule set. Chances are you're going to need at least 2 or 3. When you're talking about sanitary versus storm, you're putting your sanitary deeper than your storm, and things like that. So you can adjust those cover and slope options accordingly. I wanted to take one of these rules and kind of break it down. And I think one of the more complex rules that we run into that's very useful in these rule sets is that cover and slope. So we dug back and found a pretty dated graphic, but it still illustrates the point a little bit. When we're talking about the cover and slope rule, it absolutely checks the cover at the starting invert, and it checks the cover at the ending invert and makes sure that those have minimum cover. Now, I've heard a lot of people say that it kind of stops there and that's all that cover and slope rule does. It's actually a lot more complex than that. As we're working with that cover and slope, it divides that pipe up into thirds and uses the thirds rule to establish the best cover and slope for the pipe in that given area. So it'll take a look at the first third. And if there's a cover violation there, if we're taking a look and this doesn't meet the cover, well, what it's going to do, it's going to hold the bottom invert, the end invert, and then it's going to pivot the slope of that pipe. Now, it's going to do the exact opposite if it's the last third. It's going to hold the starting invert, it's going to pivot the slope to give you a different ending invert. And if you run into the middle, well, it's just going to take that whole pipe, drop the whole thing down. So that's how these rules kind of work to help you establish preliminary grades for these pipes and preliminary slopes for these pipes as you're just picking and clicking in plan view. They can be really handy, but we need to have them set up and ready to go beforehand. So that is, if you look back, 2 out of the 3 things to talk about with parts lists. Jumping to the next slide here, the last thing I want to talk about is, or the last kind of conjoining things I want to talk about are styles and layers. And we'll start off with styles, because when we take a look at Civil 3D, everything is designated or displayed based on layers and styles. Unfortunately, all of the pipe objects are all lumped together. Civil 3D doesn't differentiate, and I'm sure you guys already know this, it doesn't differentiate between sanitary versus storm, existing versus proposed. That's where those styles come in. So we're going to end up with a fairly large list of different styles for pipes. Same goes for structures. But if we take a sanitary sewer, for example, at a certain size of pipe, we just want to show the center line. So a single line for that sanitary sewer. But once we reach a certain size, say 600 millimeters in some firms, they like to start showing it as a double line to start looking for horizontal conflicts and things like that. And then on top of that, we also need options for profiles. When we drop it in the profiles, do we want to see the outside walls? Do we want to see the inside walls? Or do we want to see the wall thickness in there as well? We can set up display styles in different styles that are going to show it in different ways. But then on top of that, we're also going to need crossing styles. That crossing style is going to show just the little ellipse like this in your profile. So it's going to be, we need that as well to show and display our pipes exactly the way we need to. And unfortunately, this is by no means an exhaustive list. What if there were future pipes? Well, now we've got future storm sewer, single line, double line, crossing. Then we've got future sanitary sewer for all of those scenarios. And then we also, some people I've seen have done this have used their gravity networks to create water pipes and things like that. So there's tons of different options that we can do and display with styles. Unfortunately, they are all compiled in the same list. So we need to know that, and we need to kind of set ourselves up to make sure that we've got all of those different styles that we need, and then we can kind of start moving forward. With the layers, we'll talk about layers a little bit as well, and they don't really work super well when it comes to gravity networks or pipe networks as a whole kind of thing. Because again, it tries to blanket all pipes with one layer in the object layers. If I skip ahead here, we can see the drawing settings. So that's where we're going to set all of our object layers. And a pipe, we only get one layer to put pipes on. So this is by no means the best way to do it, but it's one way to do it, is I will choose the type of pipe that I draw the most of. So in that case, I'm usually drawing proposed pipes, and there's a lot more pipes and interconnections that go on in storm. So I set this to my proposed storm layers. It's going to be kind of a pain to switch back and forth, and that's really not the most efficient way to switch back and forth. What I'd rather have people do, or what I rather do, is have my network set up ahead of time. So if I flip to Civil 3D real quick, I've got a template file. And in that template file, we talked about the parts lists. So in the settings tab here, I've got my pipe networks, I've got parts lists. I've got multiple parts lists for when I run into PR storm, because that same 100 PVC pipe is going to have to be represented 4 different ways in 4 different styles. I can only assign one style to a parts list. As a result, I find the most efficient way is to create multiple parts lists in my template so that when I started drawing anytime, I've got all of those in there. The other side of it here is I can actually create pipe networks, because if I were to create a new pipe network, I have a lot of different options that I need to start picking, from parts lists to layers. And notice all of my layers are coming in as C storm. Well, then I'd have to go and change all of these for sanitary and things like that. It becomes very complicated. There's also structure label styles and naming conventions and things like that. There's a lot of decisions here that need to be made, and it's probably better off, for consistency's sake, if your company's making these decisions at a company level. The way to tackle that might be to have networks or shells of networks already created in here. So if I go into the network properties here for my PR storm, I've got the name. It's already that drainage type. That's 2 decisions there. I've got label styles already set. I've got a parts list already set. I've got layers, naming conventions. So it already has it set up so that it's MH next counter. So MH1, MH2, MH3. I can have all that stuff already set up for plan, profile, and section, which is a ton of different decisions that a new designer may not know about. So we can have that all kind of set up ahead of time and have it all set up in here so that we've got all of the networks ready to go. All we have to do is select the network in your prospector, right click and edit network. And then we're off to the races. We've got all of the different options in the parts list and we're ready to start drawing. Having that all in a template, it's all ready to go at your fingertips anytime you start a new drawing from that template. If I switch back to the PowerPoint here real quick though, we've talked about layers and kind of setting up those layers. So we've already picked all of those layers for each one of these networks we've pre-set up. We've set up naming templates for all of our manholes. The next thing I want to talk about are reference objects. So there's an alignment and there's a surface. The alignment's good for labeling and things like that. It's important, but the surface does a ton more. When it comes to rim elevations and cover, with pipes, you're going to run into a situation where you've got 1, 2, 3 different surfaces that pipe is crossing. How am I supposed to perform that cover rule to check and make sure that that pipe has enough cover across 3 surfaces? I can only have 1 reference object. As a result, we can, or to kind of get around that, we can create composite surfaces. And we can paste in the road surface, the existing surface, and the pond surface all into our 1 finished grade surface and have that ready to go and data referenced into the drawing so that we can then have only 1 surface that we need to check our cover and rim elevations against. It's really helpful to have those composite surfaces ahead of time. And we need to keep organized with it so that we're not fiddling around with that in the same drawing as all of our pipe network stuff. Pipe networks represent pretty big civil 3D objects. And as a result, they take a lot of computing power in a drawing. That's where having a template set up to pre-make a couple of those decisions and networks using data shortcuts is good to get that composite surface in there so that that surface isn't a huge load on the computing power in your pipes drawing. The goal is to have our pipes in their own separate drawing, their own separate clean drawing. It's going to make everything move a lot faster. Now, one more scenario when we're talking about organizing ourselves is creating profiles. Now, this scenario I don't find happens a ton, where we create our pipe networks before our profiles. But if that does happen, in the profile view creation, it just gives us an option to check that off and say, yeah, add the whole storm network to that profile. And while that's fine and dandy for maybe 1 small residential road, the effects compound. If we're talking about a subdivision that has 10 different streets, well, each one of those streets has a profile associated with it where we can check off storm, sanitary, water, all of those pipe networks so that they all display in there automatically. When you check this right here in the Create Profile View wizard, it's adding every single pipe and structure in that network to that 1 profile view. Now, if we've got a huge network that's got 50 some odd objects in it, and then we've got 10 different profiles that we've checked all that off for, and then we've also got storm, sanitary, and water all of a sudden we're dealing with hundreds of unnecessary parts in our profiles that are trying to regen and remain dynamic to each of those profiles. This situation can really bog down our drawings. I'm going to flip back to Civil 3D real quick and talk about one more scenario here. As we're talking about different use cases here, I want to zoom in and talk about CB laterals. We're going to kind of shift gears a little bit. Every project's got these when you're talking about storm networks. These are the entrance points to your storm networks. We need them. How do you guys draw your CB laterals? Or how do you draw your CBs? Do you sketch them in just like this and they're just polylines? That's one way to do it, but I think we're losing out on a lot of dynamic abilities of Civil 3D if they're just kind of sketched in like that. The other problem though is if I connect this CB lateral into the main line, I had that main line lateral or that main line labeled, all of a sudden it severs that main line pipe into two different pieces right there because Civil 3D doesn't handle blind connections well. And then we're talking about, we want to show this or the invert of this in our profile view. Well, flipping back to the PowerPoint here, this is one big dilemma that a lot of firms face in Civil 3D, is dealing with those blind connections of the catch basins. One solution for that might be to have those catch basins, the catch basin leads, and maybe any service laterals to properties in a completely separate network, so that we can have our CBs show up nicely, our laterals show up nicely, and then I've seen firms do this where they have another CB right here, but on a style that doesn't show. What this is handy for is when it comes time to put this in profile view, we can get an ellipse in profile view. And now you're saying, well, Colin, I can already get an ellipse in profile view. Do we know where that ellipse is coming from in profile view? Because if I jump back to Civil 3D here, that ellipse certainly is not coming from the connection point right here where the lateral ties into the main. And it's also not coming from the CB. When anytime that you're putting a crossing style in a profile view, it's going to take the crossing elevation right as it crosses the alignment. Now, obviously, that is the most useless of the three pieces of information for us that we're looking for while designing our pipe network. But Civil 3D uses that as a safeguard to say that, hey, we can't show crossing things that don't actually cross the alignment. So we want to be careful with that stuff. That also means that this short side lateral can't actually be displayed as a crossing profile because it doesn't, or crossing profile style, because it doesn't cross that alignment. We have to be careful about a lot of that stuff. Now, in this drawing, I have a large subdivision, and we're going to start talking about how to actually create networks. We talked about having things set up already so that our networks are already in there, so decisions are already made. Well, the latter half of that workflow would be creating networks from 3D objects, and we can do that from a ton of different 3D objects. And we can also use the elevations of those 3D objects. So what I'm going to take you through, and we're starting to get close on time here, is we're going to create feature lines, and we're going to make them relative to the surface so that it maintains that cover that we need. In my area, it's not 2 meters per storm, it's more like 1.5. But we're going to set that up, and then we can use those elevations from the feature line to represent the storm network, whether it's the invert, crown, top, all of that. And then we're going to take a look at how the CTC tools can help us with this whole workflow. Really, the theme of the CTC tools when it comes to pipe networks is editing en masse. That's really where pipe networks in Civil 3D fall short, is we don't have that much of a capability to edit pipe networks en masse. So Pipe Designer is going to allow us to edit pipe runs in more of an Excel format. Part Swapper is actually a free tool a free tool that's going to allow us to swap multiple structures and pipes with their sizes or do an entire material swap of the network. And then Parts Tagger is going to address all of that other metadata behind the scenes, the material, the grate, the cover, all of that stuff. So let's jump back into Civil 3D and we'll take a look. Oops. So the first thing would be to recognize that in the prospector, I already have these networks created. And if I just needed to lay stuff out, I select it in blue, I right click and I edit network. Now I've got my network set up, ready to go with my 1200 manholes and my 500 PVC. And I can start drawing. But what I can't do is create from objects. There's a workaround for this. So let's first address the fact that these are just polylines right now. I've got 3 streets here, and I need pipe networks on all 3 of these streets. So let's take these polylines and give them minimum cover elevations. We can do that by creating feature lines from objects. Now I want these in their own site. I don't want them these feature lines communicating with anything else. So let's go storm sewer layout. Perfect. We'll name each one of these feature lines. So I do have next counter. I like that. Let's go storm street, and then we'll leave that next counter in. So we've got street 1, 2, and 3. I can give these feature lines a style. I just happen to have a storm sewer layout style associated. And I'm going to use the current layer because I'm already on PStorm. So that's perfect. Erase the existing entities and assign elevations. That was my whole goal with turning these into feature lines, is assigning elevations. So I'll click OK. And I can assign elevations from not the existing surface, but my road top surface right here, or my finished grade surface. I don't need intermediate grade breaks, but I do want this to be -1.5 below the surface at all times. And we'll click OK. Now I've got feature lines that represent all of my storm sewers in here. So if I take the first road, road 1 or street 1, I can select this and I can create a pipe network from objects. Just like that. It's going to ask me for my object here. Well, I'll pick that road 1 feature line. And now it gives me that flow direction. If I don't like that, let's just hit reverse. I'd rather things kind of flow, or for the most part, flow towards this swim pond parcel over here that we're going to eventually grade everything to. That's the majority of the pipes. Let's click enter. We'll adjust the other ones later. It's not perfect, but it'll get them done. Now, this isn't the network that I want these in. It forces me to create a new network. We're going to leave this alone for now, but I am going to pick my parts list, pick my part size, and my manhole size. I don't really care about the layers again too, because I'm not going to be dealing with this network for long. I can pick the reference surface and the reference alignment, street 1, and I can use the vertex elevations. I'm going to need the outside top because I want 1.5 meters above the pipe at all times. We'll click OK, and that creates pipes and structures. Now, if I zoom in and select any one of these, they're still on network 2. Well, I want them in PR Storm. So the second half of creating pipe networks from objects is the option to merge networks right here. If I click merge networks, select the network to be merged, okay, network 2, and the destination network, I'm going to pick that PR Storm, and you'll watch in my prospector as it disappears. Awesome. Let's try that again then. We're going to go pipe networks, and I'll move a little bit faster for time's sake. There we go. We need, oops, everything's flowing in there. We need that 500 still to remain 1200. Pick our surface, pick our street 2, use the vertex elevations for the outside top, and click OK. Now, something to be careful with this workflow, there's now 2 structures right here, because both of those feature lines share the same vertex. So I'll have to deal with that a little bit later. Right now, I'll just kind of drag them away so I remember to deal with that. And for time's sake, I'm going to leave the road to the north there. So the next thing I need to do is merge this network. So I can select any pipe, get my contextual tab, and we'll do that same thing again. Merge the network, network 3 into PR Storm. Now we need to delete that extra structure. Please don't just select an AutoCAD delete. There's a lot of metadata behind the scenes. We want to make sure that we're erasing all of that. AutoCAD delete or the delete command does not do it. So we can edit the network. That's going to get us our network layout tools. That's where we can use delete pipe network objects. I'll delete that in there. I'll zoom over here and delete this one as well. Enter. And I've just saved myself a lot of time creating this pipe network. Now I just need to connect each of these pipes back in. And when we do that, we know to make sure to look for that peach colored glyph. That tells me that it actually connects into the structure. Otherwise, it's not connected. Now the next step here would be adding things in profile. How would you normally add things into profile? You can maybe select similar if everything's the same size. We're lucky that it is this time. Another nice way to do it is using the Modify tab though. That will get you the Pipe Networks contextual tab without actually selecting a pipe network. Then I can select Draw Parts in Profile and only selected parts. This gives me the option to pick my profile view or pick my parts to put into that profile view simply by windowing. And I don't have to worry about windowing other stuff because it's only going to grab the things that are actual pipe networks, pipe network objects. Click enter, it grabbed everything on street 1. I can come over here to my street 1 profile and dump that in, and everything goes in. Another nice way to do this is going to be addressed in another webinar, but let's talk about the Sim Project Suite. We've got the sheet generator workflow. One of the tools in there is networks to views. This is really handy because I can select it, select my profile view, so street 2, and pick how far do I want to look left and right for profile or for pipe network objects along street 2. Well, I probably only need like 5 meters. Click enter and everything shows up in there nicely. We could do this with all of them very, very quickly. So that's the first kind of useful tool here with the Sim Project Suite. Let's talk about a couple more. Let's say that, let's start with the free one. Notice a couple of these are light green up here. That means they're free indefinitely. Let's take a look at Part Swapper. So I can come in here and I could window a large area and select a bunch of pipes. Because I realized that up here that I didn't really have enough capacity for a 500 pipe. Well, I can press enter and I get to mass swap those out. I've got 3 pipes and 3 structures. So my replacement pipe, maybe it's only a 250 up there. I click OK and it's going to mass swap all of those in there. Good to go. That's just stuff that you cannot do in Civil 3D. And in my opinion, it's a little bit crazy that you can't do it in Civil 3D, but hey. Now, if I were going to edit all of these pipes, I could come in here and, well, this is my street 2 access. So this pipe is flowing backwards. Now I could grab it, go into pipe properties, scroll down and adjust I'll hold the start invert maybe, and we'll give this a 0.5 instead. But we're kind of guessing at that point, and it only does it one pipe at a time. Now I got to adjust the inverts here. So I have to go into my structure properties. This kind of stuff can get really tedious. Connection, well, which one's the lower one? Okay, so this should actually be 332.5. Yes, I can start editing things like that. There's a better way though. I can edit the entirety of a pipe run, looking at it from plan or profile, using my pipe designer. We're gonna have to go through this fairly quickly here. When you open up Pipe Designer, I have to select the bottom and the top of a run. Now it can go from bottom to top to bottom. It highlights everything. We can select it in plan view, profile view, but when I hit enter, it's going to open up that Excel looking dialog box that's going to allow us to edit a whole bunch of stuff in here. Things like maybe up here, looking at how we're adjusting things. Is it matching crowns? Well, right now, or are we matching inverts? It's going to change things a little bit. I'll match crowns. That's good. Are we dealing with the inverts of pipes? Are we dealing with the crowns of pipes or tops of pipes? Well, right now it says inverts. I can adjust the crowns of pipes and put it back. I can select and say, hey, I need a 0.03 sump on all of these manholes. Well, I need it on all of them. Click, drag, and good to go. When I hit apply, it's going to write that sump out to every single one of these and apply it. Slopes, let's go 0.5. I can grab that, drag it down, and apply. And you can watch as it's written out to all of these structures in here. It makes it a lot more efficient to go and edit these things. I can right click and I could zoom to or pan to in profile, and I can see exactly what's in here. It's very, very easy. I can interpolate slopes. So I could go from manhole 3 to manhole 5, and I could lock the invert. It's got a ton of precision in it. And then I could interpolate slopes, and you can watch as these slopes change for me. There's tons of different stuff we can do with these pipe networks tools from CTC. It makes pipe network editing, in my opinion, the way it should have been in the first place. Now, the last piece of these tools that I want to look at here is applying that additional pipe data, and we can use that using Parts Tagger. Again, I can just window a whole section of them. It's going to grab all of those pipes and structures, and I can click enter. From here, I get all of the options for structures, all of the options for pipes. What's my great? Well, maybe I don't have it from a list. Maybe I just want to punch it in. OPSD, whatever the case, ... I can change all of that stuff. I can adjust reference alignments and reference surfaces. I can give every one of them a description. Structures. And I can write that out to all of those pipes and structures. When I click OK, it makes editing structures and pipes that much easier. Let's go into the structure profiles, or the structure properties rather, just to check and see. And we've got OPSD ... for the grate. So to show that it actually writes these things out. Information, well, it's a SolidCAD structure. We can do this en masse very, very quickly with these tools. It can cut down your time for designing any of your pipe networks by 1/10 if we're able to use any of these tools. So with that, that kind of wraps up my presentation for you guys today. I hope it's useful. I'd love to hear any questions you guys have. But at this point, I'll turn it back over to Ramil, and I'll let us wrap things up.
Thank you, Colin.
So I'll stop sharing there, Ramil.
I'm just gonna switch to my screen here.
Now, it doesn't look like we have any questions. If you come back and you do have questions, don't hesitate. If you're looking for demos, these are only a small few tools that exist in the Sim project suite. There's a ton more for grading, labeling, corridors, tabling, and things like that. But go ahead, Ramil, if you want to wrap things up.
Yeah, and please reach out to us if there's any questions that do come up. After a couple of days from now, please reach out to us at our number there or our emails. This session is recorded and will be available on our YouTube channel by mid next week, along with our previous webinars. Just go to that, or if you can't, just reach out to myself or Colin, and we'll get you that link. So with that, I don't see any questions coming in. So I would like to thank everyone for joining, and stay tuned for our next webinar that would be on Plan Production Sheet Generator using the CTC Tools. It's February 11th. Just look out for that, an invite from your sales rep, or log into our solidcad.ca for more information on that. So with that, I'd like to thank everyone for joining. We'll see you again soon. Enjoy your rest of your day.
Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great day.